Hello and welcome to another episode of the M42 Adventures podcast. I am your host, Rick Trimmer, and today we have a very special guest on. It is my wife, Gina Trimmer. Been married to her for 18 years now. Absolute love of my life. She's supported me in everything I've ever done. She actually launched a women's community, a partnership with Order of Man a year and a half ago called revitalizedwomanhood.com. She has a podcast. She's recorded over 100 episodes now. Had some amazing women on there doing great things. And I wanted to have Gina on here to talk about the adventure that is our life. Led a pretty incredible life here the last 7 years, traveling and starting businesses. And I had a buddy reach out to me and said, hey, why don't you have Gina on and talk about the dynamics of a relationship where you work synonymously together on your goals. He says, I think that's something to be envied and something that you guys should talk about. So that's what that's the main focus of this is Gina, her story, what she's been doing, her adventures in life, and then how we do that together. So this is going to be a fun episode. I'm excited about this one. Let's jump right into it and have that conversation. Thank you. Welcome to the M42 Adventures podcast.
Thanks, babe.
Yep.
Yep.
This is how I talked to Dale just a minute ago, isn't it? Similar?
You weren't laughing.
See, you're way funner with me.
Yeah.
I actually was thinking about that before I came down here. I was thinking about, because I go through it too with my podcast, and I think about it even when you're on my podcast with me. And I told you that when you guys started doing your story segment, right? That it'll be so fun to have you and like Woody, because you'll be laughing and it'll get you into your authentic self, like your zone of genius.
Yeah.
Versus when we're podcasting, we're trying to be our authentic selves, but it doesn't quite come through. Like you and I say in Hawaii, we were just in Hawaii and we were just giggling and laughing about everything and nothing and just the most random things. And even though we are doing that, starting that here, it's still not the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. You always have cameras on you. You got to kind of think about it a little bit, which is sad. I think it comes more natural after time. But we recorded that podcast yesterday with my dad and Woody that's coming out. It'll already have come out.
I know, I'm excited.
You'll be later, but this Friday it comes out. And
I'm excited.
It's funny. It's funny.
I've heard the story, but I'm excited to hear it again.
Well, and what's good about it is I sat down and like thought of some of the details, because when I'm telling it at a party or something, it's just off the cuff and people request it.
People request it.
They have started.
I know.
Over 2 persons have requested that story.
I know, Kelly, anytime you're by Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly.
Rick, tell that story. Tell that story.
Yeah, and it's always hard to just, it's like, dance, monkey, dance. Is how I feel. And I'm like, But so I went back and thought about a lot of it. And there's some funny details that are true that, you'll get to hear. My phone ringing.
I already put mine on silent because I'm a professional.
Well, why didn't you tell me? This is like my third podcast. Okay, so getting to the nitty gritty, right? People are going to listen to this for an hour, and I don't want to waste their time. You know me and time and how important that is to me and to not waste it. And so, I'm not having this podcast just to have my wife on and hold on, let me turn this off. Just to have you on and eat up a podcast episode. I had actually somebody request this episode, which surprised me. You're actually my first woman guest.
Won't be the last. You'll have plenty.
Yeah, I'm excited. You've got some that I'm going to reach out to that are in
Anna V, Rogue Hunter. I've got a whole bunch of women that'll be awesome on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited. I love, all aspects of these people who go into like the one you said is the wing shooter.
Yeah, Anna V.
And she's like a competitor in wing shooting, which is shotguns and
birds, ducks,
crazy.
All the things. She had to explain to me. I had to say, okay, what is that?
Yeah. And so I'm excited. So you're my first woman guest.
I do have the parts.
Yeah. Awkward. I hope. And so the reason I wanted you on here was actually I had Renz from San Diego reach out, and he said, hey, I would love to hear, you're talking about all these adventures. You're talking about you're interviewing all these people about, all the adventures we're going to do. Right. And I go to Hawaii in a couple of weeks. We're going to Alaska. We're going to Africa. We're going to Scotland this year. Right. We got all these trips planned. Next week, we're going on a road trip. And he says, the thing that he envies about us is that we're on the same page. I don't really think about that as being a thing, but he was mentioning a couple marriages that he knows that are on the rocks or ending. And he says, I think the biggest fundamental flaw was they wasn't on the same page, and not even on adventure and travel and stuff like that, but even financially,
right.
And your goals. And he says, I'd love to listen to you and Gina have a conversation about, I guess, how we do that, how we started it, how we're doing it now, how it's changed, or some of the things, because it does change. And so that's kind of what this podcast is about, is for those people out there in marriages who are, and not even just, like I said, adventures, going to, one wants to travel, one doesn't. We see that a lot with our family and friends, where one of them wants to go and leave and the other one doesn't. And that's right. A struggle, but it's also, the sacrifices that, I made by working, for 3 years without taking a day off, that you were okay with me doing that. We talked about that in the Bryce episode, where he gives a huge shout out to his wife, and I did as well, where, we wouldn't be here today. A lot of wives, don't let that happen. You need to be, home at 5 and helping me with the kids, or I don't want to not get my nails done. I want to get my nails done, and I don't care if you want to go travel.
Yeah, or cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
I want everything.
Yeah, and that happens a lot too. We see that, it's funny how we see that in other marriages. I think we're the same, but it's hard to, really judge ourselves. But we see it in other marriages where, the husband will be saying, I want this. And it's like, dude, you get that and more. You always say gratitude and coming back to, being grateful.
Right.
And so that's where I want to start. So basically, everybody knows our story. If you don't, you can go to, Gina has a podcast called revitalizewomanhood.com. She has a movement for women, right, that you started with Ryan Mickler with Order Man. And you can go listen to, we've done a couple of episodes on there. I've been on Order Man's episode. You can go listen to those as well and get our story. I won't go into that here, but basically, to be real quick on this, we got married. I was very intentional about it. We were actually engaged, and I called it off.
I called it off.
Okay. I called it off and went on a trip with an ex to see, to just make sure, because I had all these buddies that were, saying I shoulda, coulda, woulda. And I never wanted to do that. And I'm grateful that I did it. I know it was hard on us and hard on us at the time, but it was the best thing I ever did for me, for us, because I was very intentional about, you were the one. Your characteristics and personality, I knew would fit with what I want. And we have 3 little boys, and every time I take them to school, we talk about either business or marriage. I don't know if you know that, but
no, I didn't. Very different than our conversations.
Is it?
Like singing along to the radio.
Yeah. I don't get them. Well, you get them a lot. I don't get them a lot. And so, I try to take that time when we're driving along, and I bring up the 2 most important decisions you'll ever make, I believe, are who you marry and what you're going to do. And so I counsel them a lot on that, and I tell them, be very, very selective. There's lots of cute girls. There's lots of nice girls. There's lots of fun girls. Get down to the nitty gritty. Well,
and that's, I think, why we both agreed that travel is a good way of showing them that getting outside of this bubble of where a lot of people, the options of who they get to marry is their graduating class. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad. Some people grow up together with their high school sweetheart. They get married and they have very successful marriages, luckily, because they grow together. I also have seen them where they do not, and they are wrong. So,
like yours.
Yeah. Luckily,
you married your high school sweetheart and got divorced.
Yep, exactly. And nothing wrong with him and nothing wrong with me. It's just we were just two very different people. And when you're that young and you are picking from a pool of this amount of people, it's like, well, which one's the best out of this amount? But if we show our kids that the pool is as big as the world, you don't have to pick this one person that you've just happened to know for a year, 2 years. You could go and adventure and meet someone clear on the other side of the world, and that's okay too, and that's a natural normal for them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you touched on a thing. I thought you were actually going another way with this. I heard a meme the other day that said, if you're dating, instead of dating somebody and going on 3 dates, take them on a trip.
Oh, yeah.
And this, I thought you were going this way with it, with travel, because I was talking about if you mesh and you said travel, and I thought you were going this way with it, where it says, you can go on a trip with somebody for a week instead of dating them 3 times. I know it costs a little bit more money, so it may not be doable for everybody, but it's one of those things where you can jump on a trip with somebody and find out pretty quick if you guys have the same,
core values.
Yeah, I always see this meme where it says, when you realize you married a guy who wakes up at 7 a.m. on vacation, wants to hike to the top of a mountain. And we're not that, You're a little bit that, but you're also considerate of me because I'm not.
Yeah, like I'll get up and shut the door and go do my own thing.
Yeah, you'll go for a walk on the beach or something because that I don't want, I like sleeping in,
That is a big deal. We did that. A couple of our very first dates were quads at the sand dunes. And not that that's a far thing, but I know a lot of girls that maybe wouldn't have done that. You said one of the things was picking me up in that old car in the Tornado with horns.
Yeah, I had a big jacked up Ford truck, that the girls are attracted to.
Yeah, it's appealing.
And I had a $500 car that I cut the roof off and put 6 foot Ricky knows the car, right? The Tornado.
Wasn't Ricky in it when Hubbard went out?
Were you in it when I backfired?
Oh my gosh, that story. That story.
Yeah, you heard about
when
Hubbard got pulled out of it at the movie theater on the ground, and
the doors weigh like 20 pounds, and it pulled him out. Someone had opened the door and pulled him out. Well, I know, but
Oh yeah. Yeah, he blamed Derek.
He blamed
Kinsey.
Derek.
I'll tell the stories. That's a story time.
That is a good
classic.
story.
I forgot about that
classic.
one. I forgot about that one. So yeah, that's one we'll have to get to.
Anyway, the Longhorn. So he'd pull up, and so for the first time you're meeting this guy, and like, oh boy, this is next level. But for me, I think it's hilarious. I think that's fun, and a lot of girls did, and a lot of girls do. But obviously, you're gonna weed out the ones that don't and look at you like, I would never. I remember driving that thing on the freeway up to your parents' house to park it, and we had to wear snowboarding goggles because the leather seats had rotted away so much that they were swirling.
Yeah, you don't realize when you're making a convertible, it was kind of an impulse thing.
You don't realize when you're making a convertible. Yeah. Said no one ever.
Yeah. So I had this old car. I drove it for a few years in college. That was my car.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't even afford more than that. That was my main form of transportation. And then started making a little money, and it became my second driver. And I remember being at my dad's shop, and we were talking about how cool it'd be to have it be a convertible. And I'm like, yeah. Why have I never thought of that? And
obviously,
I had Nick go in and get a Sawzall, and he went and we cut the top off with a Sawzall, and yeah, and it was cool for a couple of years. I remember people jumping in and
until the St. George weather
I never grinded down the metal. Like
Yikes.
It was just jagged metal. It's just so funny, my personality. I just cut the top off, threw it in the garbage, didn't keep it, just tossed it away. And I was like, now I have a convertible. This is the best thing ever. And then like 4 days later, it rains, and I'm like, shit. I should have probably kept the top and figured out how to.
The top. How would you even keep the top?
I don't know. So then I'd have to tarp it when it rained or snowed. And
I've seen it full of snow.
Yeah, I had to have a foot of snow in it. You have to. People are out there like shoveling their driveway. I'm shoveling the seats of my Tornado. I'm like, yeah, you 1%ers, living the good life. You have a roof on your car.
Anyway, let's go back. The point of this, long story long, the point of this is you have an idea of what you want and what you expect, and you have the ability to choose that. I think a lot of people don't appreciate that this is a choice. They feel like it's something that they're being rushed into.
Yeah, I think the timeline, I think that was the biggest thing in Utah was, I remember going to my family saying, here's this girl. And they're like, oh, she's beautiful. She's nice. Marry her. I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then a few years later, you know, I'd bring another girl home, you know, and they'd be like, wow, she's nice. Marry her. And I'm like, what are your guys' standards? She's pretty and nice. Like, there's more to this, you know, like I can find that pretty easy, you know? And luckily I had my dad, stepdad, Kendall. And then I always think of Travis, my brother-in-law, pulled me aside a couple times because most of the people in my family got married in their early 20s. You know, they had kids by the time I was even thinking of marriage. And he pulled me aside one time. Everybody was pressuring me, I think at one Thanksgiving or something, like, what are you doing, man? You're 24, you know. And he pulled me aside and said, bro, you're living the dream.
Keep doing it.
Yeah. He's like, don't rush. It's Utah, man. You know, like, don't. And I says, yeah, no, it's just nice to have those people kind of come aside. And not that he wasn't happy with my sister.
No, but give you permission. Well, and that's an example of high school sweethearts that, right? Were they high school or did they meet in college?
Yeah, high school.
Yeah. So high school sweethearts that was very successful and they grew together and they're growing together.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm not discrediting that, but for those of us that had more of the adventurous spirit and I'm not ready for this yet spirit, you have the opportunity to be very intentional about that decision.
Well, and I always look at, you know me, I always look at life in chapters. I've just always done that where it's like, you know, from 16 to 18 is the high school chapter, you know, that's a fun chapter. And then 18 to 23, 24 is college. And then, you know, so I always looked at it like chapters and I never mixed chapters. It's like, this is chapter 2, not chapter 3. Chapter 2 is dating and not working a lot. You know, I got fired from Titan Stairs, my dad's company, 5 or 6 times. You met me, I'll call it chapter 3.
Right.
Know?
You weren't in chapter 2 anymore. You were just barely coming out of chapter 2.
Like weeks out of chapter 2, which is a funny time because I actually just interviewed my dad and I told you about a letter I wrote to him. They would pull me aside, literally interventions with the family and say, Rick, you haven't ever held a job. Now you're 25 years old and you've never been able to hold a job. I got fired from every single entire job I ever had. Every job. I worked at ZCMI, they fired me. Pasta Factory, they fired me. And so that was my life. But I knew that that was a time when I could be a shithead.
Right.
You know, I could pack up and we grab a girl and run to Catalina Island. You know, I'd make $200 and be like, I'm good, man. I'm good for a month. I lived in the back of my truck for months, you know, I just was free. I was almost a hippie. I was like not a weird, but a hippie, you know? And when you met me, I had changed into that next chapter and I knew that next chapter was going to take a different woman. You know, I had wonderful girls in that chapter 2, but they weren't what I wanted for chapter 3. Mm-hmm. And that's where I sat down and I was very thought out about it. And I thought, I want somebody who likes my friends. That was a huge one for me. You know, wasn't judgmental. You were always, you know, I had friends that were we probably should have judged. We probably should have judged him. And we never did. And, you know, I remember having conversations with my ex-girlfriends and they're like, he's a bad person. And I says, no, he's a good person with a bad habit. Mm-hmm. I remember saying that all the time.
Right.
And you were like that, you know, you're like, I love this person or that person. And so you had these values and I thought this could work long-term. Right. And I look back, we've been married 18 years, right?
Almost.
Yeah. And you think about this stuff more as you get older and, you know, I have a lot of friends around me going through divorces, unfortunately. Right. And a lot of them, you know, it's weird because a lot of them have been married 17, 18, 25, 23 years, you know, and I'm like, man, that's crazy that 23 years in, it's just done, you know? And you get upset about this a lot where I use hypotheticals or examples and you think that I'm using it as I'm thinking about it to do it. Mm-hmm. And I'm really not.
Well, because your brain processes things differently and it always has. And that's why you're so thought out and you live in the future a lot. You live in the past a little bit, but you live in the future a lot. And in all of these things, and I have never been that way. You know me. Like you'll start ruminating on something that hasn't happened yet, possibly never will happen, but you've got all these different scenarios, and that's what makes you successful as an entrepreneur and as a person, is because you've looked at every scenario. This could happen, this could happen, this could happen. But for most people, if they did that, that's anxiety, that's stress, that's things that they shouldn't be doing. And I just don't. You know me, you'll bring something up and I'm like, I don't even want to think about that. It's like, I just don't. I turn it off. So I'm lucky in that way. But for you, it's taken me this long to realize that that is how you process things. That is how you have like this process of elimination of, if this happens, it's like a dispatcher. I was a dispatcher for 6 years. And it's like, okay, if this scenario happens, this is how I'm going to get out of
100%.
this. If this scenario happens, this is how I'm going to direct them out of this. You have to be prepared and you have to be trained for that. So it's taken a long time to realize that that's how your brain works, because most people, that's not the case. Most people just obsess about things that might never happen. You're actually looking at it as a scenario that if it does happen, you'll have a strategy of how to get out of it.
Yeah, 100%. I get anxiety not having a plan.
Right.
You know, and I know my dad has, when we go on vacation with my parents, which we do often, you know, we just took the Micklers, right, to Costa Rica last year.
Right.
And I had it all planned out. I planned everything, right? All of our stays, everything we're going to do. And some people enjoy that. Ryan told me on my podcast here a couple of weeks ago, he says that was top 3 vacations he's ever had in his entire life.
Yeah.
And I think his personality likes the structure. You know, for me, like you're saying, to not have structure, to not know my numbers in business or what could happen if I don't do these numbers or this sells or hire these people, or to me, I'm drifting, and I get anxiety drifting. You know, I'm like, I've got to have, when I lay awake at night and I'm like you say, I'm living in the future. I'm in essence feel like I'm solving the problem. And you used a perfect example of you when you were in dispatcher. You know, somebody calls, you have to be ready for that call to be a shooting,
Right.
a choking, you know, nothing, just being pulled over, you know. But if you just said, I'm not going to live in the future, that's too stressful, you know, I'll just handle it when a shooting happens.
Yeah.
And then
You wouldn't be prepared for it.
and then they call you up, it'd be chaos.
Right.
So I don't understand that type of thinking at all, you know. And like you said, I know a lot of my strengths are my weaknesses. You know, I'm very demanding. You know, I'm very, Ricky can vouch for that, you know. And
I think anybody that knows you can vouch for that.
Yeah, probably. But at the same time, I'm quote unquote successful.
Yeah, and you get stuff done.
You know, and so I think that's coming back to our marriage and why it works. Is, to be honest, I feel like I'm set in my ways. You know, like I'm that old dog that won't learn new tricks. I believe I'm always right? I believe that I know best. And you are nice enough to let me, you know?
What's interesting about you saying that is that's how you perceive it. But have you ever seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding? And the mom says, yes, he is the head of the household, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn the head whichever way she wants. So, and I'm not saying that, it's just I see where you have your strengths and I let you lead.
Yeah.
I allow you to be what I chose in you, which is, like Ryan likes to say, protect, provide, preside. I chose those qualities in you, and so I let you do those things. If I took that away from you, if I took the ability of you, that's demasculating. That would be why we didn't work out. That would be what...
a deal breaker.
Yeah, and so I do give and take, but you've seen my line. I draw it. I've drawn the line as well, and I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, you're just saying that that's what makes us successful, is you allowing me, you're the neck is where you started.
Right. I see where
I don't want to bring you back to that point because I didn't care for that analogy, but that's where you were.
It's really true. Women, we just learned all about this at my retreat. We had this amazing guest. She's the queen of this, but this is going to sound so frou-frou-y on this podcast. I'm sorry. Just like go to white noise for a minute, guys. But she was talking about women in their seasons of their cycle. So 4 seasons, just like just like Mother Nature, whatever, winter, spring, summer, fall. I'm not going to get into it, but oh my gosh, I just lost that.
I'm not going to remind you what you were talking about. So you were talking about guns and hunting.
So it's in our femininity, like our beautiful femininity is when we are the strongest. But because of the way society has tried to conform us and change us and even that we've had to, maybe because now they're single women and they have to get into their masculine because now they're providing for their family. So it's women are getting so deep into their masculine that they're not allowing men to do what they are here to do. And that's be in their masculine, and that's provide, protect, preside, And so when women can get into their own natural feminine, we are nurturers, we are mothers, we are, these natural things that make us strong, but society wants us to view them as weaknesses. They're all just like masculinity. They're trying to get rid of masculinity because that's what's going to make us strong. Yeah, that's what's going to make a strong country, right? Is this beautiful masculinity. Well, in that same respect, this beautiful femininity is what's going to make our country strong. And these are the women that stand behind their husbands and support them and cheer them on instead of degrade them and belittle them. And,
Yeah, I did a post on Mother's Day for you, and it was actually a really good quote that I came up with. It's probably out there, but it said, you always hear that behind every great man is a great woman. Mm-hmm. And mine said, behind every great man is a great woman that gets no credit.
Yeah.
And I think that's, watching you with your community and over the last 18 months of, pushing that rock up the hill, so to speak, right? Diving into that world, you thought it was going to go left. You just thought there's all these women out there that think like me, and there's not a lot, and that's unfortunate, and like you said, it's, what you're seeing is, unfortunately, is the man is so dominant that it just blocks out the woman and her light.
Yeah, bulldozes.
And so I think that's, we talked about this last night. We were saying, hey, what are we going to talk about on the podcast? We talked for 5 minutes about it. And I says, I think a big thing is that me and you are good at is negotiating. Mm-hmm. It's never been, I feel like, and I don't think it's ever been that way. When we first said, hey, I remember being there on New Year's Eve, and we were starting to make a little money back from losing everything. And I says, hey, I think we might be able to enjoy some of the fruits of our labor, that we've sacrificed our life for 7 years. And I says, what do you want to do? And you're like, I don't know. What does that mean? Right. And you're like,
yeah, I didn't know how to dream much bigger than a house, a car, nice house, nice car.
I want babies.
Right,
I want,
kids.
Kids. I want a nice house, a nice car. And I'm like, well, those things don't interest me anymore. They did, but then I lost them and realized that they are just pointless to me now. And I says, hey, listen, I've changed from this whole experience. I don't want a big house and a nice car anymore. I would like to travel the world. And you were like, sounds good.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's an option? Okay, let's do that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and, like you said, you had never thought about it, but I didn't come to you and say, we're traveling the world. We're not buying a car.
Right.
I came to you saying, hey, are you willing? Does this sound good to you? And you were like, yeah.
Well, and a perfect example of you changing at that time, that specific time, was you were, excuse me, doing a lot of Dave Ramsey type stuff because we were...
You have 2 drinks in front of you. You could take one.
Sorry, your microphones are way...
Is that one whiskey?
Sensitive.
Or is the other one whiskey?
This one is collagen. This one is protein.
You might be middle-aged when you walk in with like 4 different drinks. Yeah, what were you saying?
No, I was saying at the time we were getting into all of this new way of budgeting and finances and how to manage our finances. And so you had been introduced to Dave Ramsey, and you had mentioned in one of the podcasts with me that it was like a eye-opening moment when he said, you cannot go to your spouse and say you are the problem. Yeah. You are the spending, because that just turns into competition, like we were talking about yesterday.
Even when they might be.
Yeah, well, yeah,
You know,
even
really,
when they might be,
you have to-
because all you're
it's-
going to do is get the defense. Imagine a cat and the cat's fur just goes up.
Yeah.
Like you walk up to a woman and say you are doing something, her fur is immediately going to go up, and everything after that is just white noise.
Yeah, that's one of those things where I've coaching some of these people with finances, and I'll say, what are your finances? And they'll say, my wife's out of control. And she usually, not usually, she
Maybe.
might be.
Mm-hmm.
She might be.
Right.
And I says, but it's not, so the problem, one of the problems, but it's how you address it. And that's, I think, the key to marriage
Oh, yeah.
is how, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Well, and the intention behind it. If
Yeah.
you're intentionally trying to attack your spouse, doesn't matter how you say it. It's your body language is going to come across as an attack.
Yeah. How many times did I come to you for years?
It's
saying,
my fault. We're broke because it's my fault.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it was true. Just kidding.
Definitely not true.
I thought you'd laugh, not pull out a knife. For those of you on YouTube, that is a knife. Go to the video. But that's a perfect example of me seeing somewhat of a problem and coming to you, and I came to you for years saying, "You're the problem. You're the problem. You're the problem." And then I finally came to you and said, What do we want to do here? What are our goals?
Yeah.
And you said, I don't know. And he says, well, I want to travel. And you're like, okay. And I says, for us to travel, this is what has to happen. You can't get your hair done every day. You can't get your nails done every day. I can't go on hunting trips. I can't go, eat out. Whatever it was, we both said, this is for us to hit these goals. This is what you have to sacrifice and I have to sacrifice. Do we want to do this?
Yeah.
And I am grateful that you said yes, because I know of a lot of marriages where they say no.
Right. Well, and also this isn't just in finances. This is in growth as well. I'm realizing, meeting all of these new people that come find me, that, well, and also I know of Ryan's community. This is also they have this problem as well, where one person is now on this journey of development and personal growth, and their spouse is like being left behind. A couple of the women in my community, actually, when Ryan finally announced, hey, Iron Council, this is the women's version, the Revitalized Sisterhood, ran over, because when their husbands first started this journey, they were resentful of it. They were mad that they were doing this thing that was changing them in this great, empowering way. And they
Jealous.
felt like resentful. I mean, they felt like they were being left behind. And so they were upset about it. It's taking so much of you away from us, when really the underlying thing is that they wanted to do it too, but they didn't know how. There was no way to do it. So as soon as there was a women's community for this doing the same thing, they ran over, and they've been with me since I started.
Hey guys, let's step away from the conversation real quick, and I wanted to talk to you about a few things that M42 Adventures is offering this year. First, I'd like to talk about our retreats experiences here in southern Utah. They will be on a 50-acre ranch, absolutely amazing property, and it's a place where you can come and learn from the experts in their fields, build friendships, and enhance your outdoor skills. We're going to have everything from fly fishing experiences, UTV experiences, horse riding, archery, survival experiences, hiking, outdoor cooking, firearms. It's absolutely amazing. We just had our last retreat a couple of weeks ago. 33 people attended, and it was an absolute amazing event. If that sounds like something you'd want to come do, it's all inclusive, and I promise it will change you. So hopefully you can look into those dates. They are August 29th to September 1st and September 12th to September 15th. Look into that and see if those will work for you, and we'd love to see you out there. The other one is our Africa experiences. This fall, we have 2 Africa experiences coming up, August 5th to the 11th and August 11th to the 17th. We've actually sold, I think, 19 places to those events, so it is filling up. But if you'd like to come out, again, it's the men, women, children. I'm taking my wife and my 3 little boys, age 12, 9, and 3. So it's family friendly. It should be an absolutely amazing experience as well. It's not just hunting. You can come and do the photo safari, helicopter ride, or go to an orphanage. I'm actually very excited about this one. So if that's something you'd like to come out and check out, I will be the headliner August 11th to the 17th, and Ryan Mickler will be the headliner August 5th to the 11th, and we'll be spending time with you during that week and getting to know each other. So I would love to see you out there. Again, those are some of the things we have coming up. If that's anything you'd be interested in, we're also going to start offering corporate retreats, family group retreats here in Southern Utah. If you'd like to come out and have one of these experiences with the horses, with the UTVs, with the firearms, with the archery, and bring your company, your family, or just a group, we can cater it to you as well. So that's something that new that we are going to start offering. We've got a couple of those in the works for this summer with some companies that want to bring their employees out and actually partner with M42 and have their own retreats. So just a few of the things we're offering. Again, we're excited about all this. If you'll continue to listen to the podcast, follow us on social media, share, follow, we sincerely appreciate that. All right, let's get back to this conversation.
But I still do have people, and I know Ryan does in his community as well, where you have one spouse doing all of this work, trying to say, how can we be better? How can I be better? How can our marriage be better? How can I be a better mother? You know, all of these things, but it's like dragging a boulder up a hill. If you are literally the only person that cares enough, or I don't even know if cares is the right word, but do you know? So if you have one person who's reading all of these amazing books, self-help, like Dale Carnegie and David Ramsey and all these things, but you have this other one that's like, no, I'm perfect the way I am. Everything I do is good. And this person obviously has their own issues. They have successes and strengths, but they have their own issues. So if you are changing, it's like I said about the high school sweetheart. If you are the lucky ones who you grow together, then you will be successful. But the reason you get divorces is because you're growing apart. You are constantly turning into different people. Do you know we turn into an actual different person every 7 years? All of our micro whateverisms and everything change so frequently that every 7 years we're like basically a different person. Kids, it's daily. Kids wake up a different person because they're growing so rapidly that they wake up a new person. So you're growing separately.
I don't agree with that. I think you
Google
change.
it.
Google's full of shit.
Google
man.
it. Well, think about
as the
we
famous
turned
Roy
into-
Benson would say, Google's full of shit.
Yeah. Well, think about
I agree
when
that
we
you
were married,
change, but I don't
we
think
were
you are
certain
different.
people. We were certain people. And then
100% I
and
agree
then
with
we
that,
went
but I
through
don't
with-
agree that it's.
Well, you're shedding your skin, you're shedding your hair.
I know.
you're
I
growing new hair,
understand the
you're going-
concept. I understand all that. I'm just saying. I think you.
Then go with it as a concept.
Yeah, you're 1.0 and you're going to 5.0, but you're not. You're adapting.
But small steps over time make big leaps, right?
yeah, I know you're-
So if
yeah,
you're
you're
changing this
changed.
teeny little
Yeah.
bit, but this person's staying here, you're
Yeah, me and Kendall talked about that where, I always use the analogy or the story of, not even the story, just the example of if you judge me today as I was, me and my
Right,
brother,
exactly.
right? Me and my brother got in a fight in business when I was like 30, I don't know, 31, 32. And, we still haven't totally made up, right? We know that, it's still awkward, right? And I always tell my dad, if I judged him or he judged me 12, 13 years later off of that person, then shame on us.
Right.
Hopefully we're both different people. If we're not, then shame on you.
right. It's like when you meet that person that you knew in high school and they're doing something incredible and you're like, really? You?
Yeah. Or the one that you meet that's doing the same thing, like Uncle Rico. It's like still living in the past.
Coach would have put me in.
Yeah, and it's like, there needs to be a balance of both. But I've actually had that here where I've had people come in and
Oh my gosh, yeah. Remember Woody was meeting with that person.
Yeah,
and they're
Harmony.
Like, Harmony, yeah. And she's like, wait, what?
I
What
can
does
walk-
Rick do here? Is he the shop guy?
Yeah, I come walking in and I'm like, hey, what's up? What are you doing? She's like, oh, I'm getting some flooring or something. I don't even know what she's buying. And I'm like, oh, cool. And she's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I own it. And she's like, what? You should be in jail or dead somewhere, And I'm like, oh, I turn things around,
One day I woke up and said,
Yeah,
today's the day.
literally. One day I woke up and said, today's the day. But yeah, and that's a perfect example of how people can change. Me and my dad talked about that, yesterday recording where he says, you are not the same 24 to 25, you are not the same person. And so I know what you're saying. I agree with
Well,
that.
and that gets me back to something I actually want to talk about earlier. I forgot, but you say how you're always right. You feel like you're always right. I don't see that because I watch you read all of these books to become a better owner, a better manager, a better businessman, and you are willing to do these things to change, to become better. I know other people who are not willing to change.
Well, then I would play devil's advocate there and say I know that I'm right by knowing that I'm wrong.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean, though? But
Yeah.
that's because that's what my dad says.
Well, but you're that way in certain areas.
Yeah,
Because for men, I think they have to do good to feel good. So you have to prove your worth by creating success, creating financial stability. That's you. And then you feel good. Where it's opposite for women. They have to feel good to do good. So you do it in certain areas because that is how you are providing. And
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we know that, that's one of the things where you'll say, why don't you do this? And I'm like, I didn't think to do that, but I took you to Paris.
Right, exactly.
And that's my love language to you, which may not be what you want for
Right.
love language, So, yeah, I think that's, so, bringing this back, the things that have made us successful, we, have built businesses together. We have traveled the world for 7 years, 60 something countries, spent millions of hours together, right? I mean, just, that's one thing where people are usually shocked. Most people are really surprised that me and you can go to Europe for, our longest full stint together, I think was like 10 months.
I
Like
was going to say 9 months, something.
It was the one where we were actually supposed to fly to Africa, was our longest ever time out away from not coming home for a couple weeks, just seeing the
Right.
family, which I had planned out to where we were going to be out like 7 or 8 months. And then we were going to go see the family. And then that fell apart. And then we went to England, right?
Yeah.
But, 9 months, 10 months together, 24/7. I mean,
In small, it's tight
Oh.
spaces. Like our cars usually, I was telling someone, I think it was Africa, I was telling them, I'm like, Rick is so cheap that he was
Frugal.
6'5".
Frugal. Difference. Look it up.
That he's 6'5". I said, you've changed, because it used to be the first car we rented when we leased, when we went to Europe for the first time.
Ladybug.
It was like the tiniest, you were just shoved in there. The biggest we could fit was the 2 car seats in the back seat, even though it was a 5-person car.
Wasn't that Ladybug?
Yeah. And you're like scrunched in like a tin can. And
I hear people all the time that
so
are like,
we were together in very close quarters.
I hear people all the time say, "Oh man, that flight to, Australia is so tight. How do you do
please.
it?" And I'm like, please. If I could buy a seat in the upper
Overhead
compartment and it was cheaper, I would be in there for 17 hours. Like, I went as cheap as I could go. If there was cheaper, I could still have folded another fold.
Say it makes me feel more comfortable when I look at my bank statement.
And that's it.
It would be like glowing up there with
Well,
your
and
little light on.
I always told you we had passive income from our investments in our
Yeah.
rental properties, but it wasn't, we were on a budget.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to you saying, at the time when I first retired, I think we had enough money for like 2 years, if everything went according to plan. And I remember going to you saying, listen, we can get a bigger car. We can stay in a, bigger house.
Yeah, it just takes
But
the time.
it's going to take, I remember me telling you all the
Yes.
time, I'm like, that takes 3 months off.
Everything,
that takes 2 months off.
Everything we do, I like to say, is like a game of would you rather. If that's easier for your marriage to think of, sit down with your wife. If it's a not as intense way of talking about these things, it's like, would you rather? Because Rick has come to me every single time and said, would you rather this or that? Would you rather this or that? And every time it's been the same as him. I keep traveling. But the one time that it finally was different and it changed, he probably listened a lot more because it was like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah. And like you said, would you rather, one thing that has really stood out to me, and I sent you this a decade ago where, it was a picture of a shirt. And I says, if you need, or you sent me, I like this shirt. I want to buy this shirt. And I says, if you need that shirt and it's worth trading 2 hours of my time to be at work for that, buy it. And that's how I kind of look at everything in life is
Which is true and obnoxious.
It
but
is.
true.
It is,
But
yeah.
it is because
And I do it to myself.
It's called the mirror.
Yeah.
You hold it up to your face and it's like, do I really need that? This means that my husband has to be away from our kids and his family for whatever amount of time that costs. Do I really need that?
Yeah, I had a buddy the other day say he has a friend who wants to go hunting with us, and he's like, he can't afford it, and then he's like, he buys a $70,000 Dodge and a travel trailer for $100,000.
Yeah, I hate the I can't afford or I don't have enough time.
And my buddy's like, well, you just chose to take your time and transfer it into that truck and not take your time and transfer it into a hunt.
Exactly.
And that's what you chose.
Yeah.
I have people with beautiful houses. Our house we rent, from your parents. It's a small, 1,100 square foot house?
1,300.
Oh, wow. It's huge.
1,300
square foot house with 4 of us.
Yep.
And,
4,
you actually.
5.
Oh,
We
is
have
there
3
5?
kids.
Oh, shit. Jeez. Yeah, 5. And I remember you actually talking to your sister, and she said something about you guys are lucky to have been able to live in that house for so long. And you turned around and said, could you ever have lived in this house for so long?
Yeah, you would have never been able to live in this house.
And she's like, good point. That is one of the, I always think about that all the time, where that is one of the best comebacks, because you went from, her saying you're lucky, you're blessed to have, which we are. We always say we're grateful to your parents, but 9 out of 10 people that I know personally could not live in that home with 5 people.
Right.
It's just,
would you rather?
It would be.
Would you rather live like this?
Yep.
But go travel the way we do?
Exactly. And, we're not here a lot. The house has been vacant a lot. We make our decisions. It's like we could go buy a big house. We could go pay cash for a big house. But we don't want that because it's not going to
align with our values and our dreams right now.
And I think that's the other thing that I think that happens a lot, getting back to marriages, and they're trying to do, start a business. They're trying to go on a trip or something, and they're having these discussions about where they're maybe not seeing eye to eye, is more information.
Oh, yeah.
I know when I come to you the other day, I said, do you want to go to Minnesota, or would you like to go to where? Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And you said, Minnesota.
Right.
I love Kelly. I want to go to Minnesota. And I said, I love Kelly too. Matt, but Kelly's sweet. And I says, here's the fact. Here's not the facts. Here's more information.
Right.
And I says, we're probably going to go to Minnesota in October anyway. We've never been to Vancouver. It's a shorter drive. I went through the information, and you're like, oh, that one makes more sense. I'm good with that. So I think a lot of times when we go to our spouse and it's like, I want to travel more. I want more sex. I want more, I want to start a business. I want, whatever it is. If I came to you and went home and said, I want you to cook more food for me, you'd be like, what? What just came out of your mouth? But if I walked in and said, honey, I want to save $2,000 this year and take you to Hawaii.
Right.
So if we eat at home, we could do that. You'd be like, oh, I can meal prep.
Right.
I think a lot of times when we go into our negotiations, we just think they know the other side of it. It's like, I have all the information. It's like, Gina, I want more sex. Well, sorry, I'm giving you enough. And it's like, well, here's how that would work better for our family and whatever's happening.
Right.
And you'd be like, oh, okay, that's important to him. That's going to make this better. That's going to make this better. Let's do that. And I think that's where a lot of people miss the big picture, is we go to our spouse. I actually told you something back in the day. I think what happens, and I think this is true on multiple facets, but I think a lot of times the reason marriages end is we've been married 18 years, right? And so everything I'm going to say.
I know what you're going to say right now.
I know. And that's true. And that's the problem. That's a good thing and a bad thing. But when you've been with somebody for 18 years, you know everything. And so what happens is, I always use this example with you, where when you first get married, your fight goes from 0 to 5. You've never fought before. So your fight started at 0 and it goes to a 5. You've been married a couple of years, it starts at a 3 and goes to a 7. Pretty soon you've been married 18 years. And if you don't reset, if you don't recalibrate, you go from a 10 to a 10. You know, I can come home some days and walk in and it just snaps. And I say something and you're like, oh, I know what you're going to say. Here, you know, and I'm like, at least let me get
18
mad.
years worth of fights comes rolling out.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens even in conversations about, you know, when I come to you and say, hey, I'm going to start M42 Adventures. And you're like, oh, here we go again. Gonna follow Rick's dreams, you know, whatever, you know. But it's like,
You are so lucky. I think everybody listening to this podcast is like, oh my gosh, this guy's so lucky. He's got the best wife on the planet.
he takes her all over the world and shows her the sunrises in New Zealand. What a lucky girl. Is that what you meant? Is that what you're saying? I toned out for a minute. She was telling me something. I wasn't really listening. Was that Dumb and Dumber? She was telling me something. I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention, but anyway. But no, we're both very lucky. But I think that's another fault, and I'm guilty of all of these things. I'm not saying we're perfect by any means. You know, we've been, you know, to the end of our limits many times.
Most people get almost divorced like every now and again at home. We've been almost divorced in like multiple countries.
Yeah. And I think the key is, I think the thing that saves us is you know, because I'll walk myself off a ledge for spite, you know that, and you're always good about saying, hey, you went too far, you know, come back, give me a hug. You went too far, Rick. You should be apologizing, but you will let me apologize. And that's a huge savior for our marriage because, you know me, I'm so stubborn. I'm like Roy. I'm like Mike. You know, I have those tendencies of just, I'll burn the house down and then sit in the ashes and be like, I won. And it's like, you're sitting in a burned down house, you asshole. You know, and you're able to say, hey.
Yes, I'm a saint.
You're able to say, hey, you started the fire. Here's a fire extinguisher. Put it out and we'll,
Right.
you know, carry on. And so I think those are a lot of the qualities that we possess that, you know, I think with marriage, like you said, you have to effort. You know, I see a lot of people who just kind of coast or not tap out, but what's the word where you just aren't paying attention. You know, you're just kind of like there.
Yeah, you're stagnant. You're just on the hamster wheel of life.
And then the other part of it too that's hard, I think, is, you know, you're on this journey. I've been on the journey of self-help and reading books for 20 years, right? And now you're on it. And I think this is what scares a lot of people too, especially men, is when your wife gets home.
Yeah, them women are starting to have ideas.
Yeah.
Get back in the kitchen.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Yeah.
She telling me about her seasons of her cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. Like witchcraft.
Never come near me in my winter.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, you know, that's what's scary is that's why they had the Salem witch trials.
It is.
You know, because
Did you know
women
that's
started
actual
thinking.
fact?
No. Did you know they never burned them?
I didn't.
I heard that last night or this morning on a show. It says they never burned them. That was a myth. They hung them and beat them, threw stones at them. They never.
So random.
But
it was because of women that were learning how to follow their cycles and their seasons. That's who were the witches.
I think it was because they had ideas. But you can say
They had ideas because they were
you are
enlightened.
lucky you were not there 100 years ago. You would be.
I would have been the first one out.
Oh my heck! You would be the ringleader. Jeez.
All American women.
Yeah, all American women.
But yeah, I think that's another thing that scares a lot of people is.
Well, it's true because imagine you don't realize what trauma work is. You don't realize that you have these things that come with you from your childhood for whatever reason, big T's, little T's, whatever. And you carry them along with you. And for some reason, they create why you do what you do when you're an adult. And then you realize what that is. And you say to your husband, oh my gosh, the reason that I don't like it when you say something like this to me is because of this. And now your husband's like, you're so full of crap. Instead of just maybe listening and maybe rolling your eyes, fine, whatever, but like trying to understand that this person's trying to communicate with you. It's like we get in these marriages and we think we know this person better or we know them better than they maybe know themselves. And so we discredit the fact that they are a human being with their own thoughts. It's like you said, when men are so masculine and so overbearing that the women lose their light and lose their...
Well, and we feel threatened.
Yes,
You know, I
you
think
do. And
that's,
so that turns on that masculine even more, I think.
I think so too. I think, you know, I know me and you've gotten in several fights. You've been doing this for 18
Oh,
months.
yeah. You're like, oh, you read a book.
Yeah,
You're
because
an expert.
you'll come into a fight, you know, and it used to be, our fights used to be, you know, you're an asshole, Rick, you know, just
and now I'm
generalities.
You're self-sabotaging.
Yeah, now you're like, you're in your winter cycle, Rick. You know, and I'm like, what the
You're in
fuck?
your winter
You know? And but I get annoyed, you know, honestly.
Yeah,
you
because
know.
it's a mirror. You know, there's truth to it when I'm using words that are actual proven.
Yeah. Well, and
Psychology.
maybe I'm not there yet. Maybe. But it's one of those things where you know, we're not going to crack the code today, obviously, but there's been thousands and thousands of years of man leading the woman being submissive, the woman being behind the man's out, you know, leading the charge. Right. I saw a thing the other day that said, it was something about saying women want to do what men do or something. I don't know how it came out.
I don't.
But it was showing how it's something about, it showed all the bridges built and all the buildings built and everything built.
Everything
and it's like,
that men did.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sent it to me.
And it's like, this is, you know, everything that we've done. And so obviously we have thousands of years of this happening, right?
Right.
And just in the last couple, 50, 70 years.
Not even that many.
Isn't
Women's health finally became separate from men's health in the 90s.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So up until the 90s, women were just men.
Yeah.
So
all the studies
of the studies were, well, this is what men do. And it's like,
yeah,
men don't change ever.
Yeah. And so I think that's obviously that's the fight you're fighting right now.
Yes.
You know,
that
is
the fight
you
I'm
have
fighting.
And I know, you know, the thing that I would tell people listening to this, my audience, is it's obviously men and women, hopefully. But, you know, I know with you, I know what you're trying to do. I'm with you every day. I see you every second. You know, obviously, you know, the last year and a half we've been together most of the time while we're traveling, and you're still building Revitalized Womanhood. And I would tell people not to be afraid of it. You know, I think what happens is we hear revitalized and we think, you know, you're changing. You want to be.
Well, I think they think I'm going to be this man hater. I had someone say that once, and I'm like, a man hater? I love your masculinity. Like, I love you to protect me.
And that's what I mean. I know you want to be, your favorite thing in life is being a mother.
Oh my gosh,
like,
yes.
I know that.
Since day one.
Yeah.
That's never been a question.
And so
me.
that's what I would tell people is it's not, you know, Ryan always uses examples, which I love, is he says, you don't have to have one without the other. You know, a lot of people think he used an example.
Yeah, they're not exclusive.
Yeah, he used an example yesterday.
In his post yesterday.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He says, I can love them, but I don't have to support them.
Yeah.
You know, that. And
they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, he does that a lot where it's like, you can have a strong, you know, independent woman that is a good mother. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you can have a woman who has a side hustle, who is a good mother.
Right.
It doesn't
and will take care of her husband. This is her trying to take care of her family. This is her thinking that this is her way, but she's got something in her. So think about the reason you married this woman. You saw something in her. And back when I think, gosh, I don't think my kids really know Gina. I don't think they know. They know mom, but like how we get when we get out together and we are silly and we dance and we can laugh and we can be these things. I get so in myself of raising these humans and I have to take care of them. I lose myself in that. But when we let her out, I will be a better mom to them. If I can dance with them and be silly with them and make them feel like they don't have to be scared to come and tell me something they did wrong, or, you know, that I'm going to be better. So in these communities, that's what's happening. These are not these toxic communities. I know they're out there, believe me. But in these communities, it is, they were actually physically built to work together, because Ryan's men's community, mine's the women's community. They were meant to work together so that they're working on each other at the same time. We're working on ourselves at the same time. And that way we're helping each other grow together.
Well, you just had an event here last week.
Right, my retreat.
Had a bunch of girls come out, mm-hmm. and a third of them were pregnant.
Yeah, we've got a lot of babies being made this year.
And you love that. You know,
Yes.
that's what I mean. It's like, you know,
I said next year might be newborns. The
Yeah.
retreat's going to be
Yeah, that'd be
revolving
cute.
around
Yeah,
newborns
that'd be
and
cute.
breastfeeding. And
Yeah.
like, it's just what it is. This
but
is
that's,
mom life.
but that's what I think is, you know, that I love with what you're doing. And I think that's what works good with, you know, our goals in life. You know, one thing I like is, obviously I stayed home last year for a few months while you were trying, 2 years ago, while you were trying to launch Revitalize Womanhood, while you did launch Revitalize Womanhood. Mm-hmm. I was a stay-at-home dad for, I think, 6 months or something. I ended up doing whatever it was. And then I came to you. You had come to me and saying, hey, you know, I want to do this. I don't want to go travel right now. This is what I want to do. And like you said, you drew that line and I'm like, man, she doesn't draw many lines, so I better do it. And I did it. And then I came to you after we had set a couple boundaries. We pushed back past them and you communicated with me why. And then you came and said, I came to you and said, Kay, I want to go back to traveling. And you said, okay. And so I think that's where this comes full circle, where know the person that you're marrying, know their foundation, know their fundamentals. And if you know that, then when they want to do something, it's okay. You know, like I think you have, if you knew, like you said, you were saying, if you have this woman that you married at 25 and she's the love of your life, and then at 35, she wants to start a side business, don't panic
Right.
that she's changed and,
It's
you
her
know,
saying that there's something in me saying that I can do
need more. I need more.
Well, and that goes back to, I'm sorry, I have a tickle.
You have 2 drinks. Remember
I
you.
know. Stop.
Where are we at on time, Ricky?
Yeah, what time is it?
58 minutes.
Oh, you got 2 minutes, Gina. Wrap it up.
Just kidding. No, what I was going to say before is when you were talking about men who have wives that are overspending or that can't stop spending, or that, you know, there is an underlying thing here. There is a
Yeah.
self-worth
Absolutely.
situation.
Yeah.
And these women, we forget who we are. We forget who we are. We become a wife. And no one told us how to do that. We just kind of figure it out by watching other people do it. There's no handbook, right? And then all of a sudden we become a mother. Nobody tells you how to do that. You have no idea other than listening to what you should know naturally and what what's been modeled for you before, right? So that's all you know. So you're just constantly shoving down all of this intuition and all of this your natural normal gifts, instincts. Yeah, you're shoving it down because you're looking for all of these, like, how do I do this? How do I do this? So you're looking for all these external things saying how to do it. And so you lose yourself. You do. You lose yourself in becoming a wife, in becoming a mother, and how many multiple times you have children because you're trying to find yourself again, but then you're pregnant again. And then let's not even postpartum depression and blah, blah, blah. It's this thing. And so all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, when was the last time I danced? When was the last time I used to love to sing? When was the last time I just turned on music and was singing along with it? And you're like, huh.
I was talking to a buddy the other day. We went to lunch, and you know he's going through some troubles and with his marriage. And I says, you know, what's going on? And he says, we're about to be empty nesters, and we just we're not connecting.
Right.
You know, and I says, I've never been through that. I don't know. I don't have any advice. You know, hopefully you guys can. And he says, well, I'm going to therapy. And I says, good for you. And he was, you know, don't tell anybody, you know, and I'm like, good for you.
So I love
Like,
therapy. I think everybody should do it.
Yeah, I've never done it, but
Me neither, but I wish I would.
I know everything. So I don't know what they would tell me, but that's fine.
I wish you would too.
Yeah. But he says, I'm going to therapy. And I says, okay, what have you learned at therapy? And he says, you know, what's interesting for me, which really stuck with me, we talked about a lot of stuff, but he says, you know, when my kids leave, I'm thinking, I've done my job. They're successful.
All right.
I'm good. Like I did. And now let's go have a party. And she's thinking, I'm losing my friends. I'm losing my purpose.
These are my people.
So he's looking at it like, I'm good and I'm going to miss them, but I'm good. And she's looking at it like, don't leave.
Right.
And so I says, wow, that's just that
That
little
is an
sentence.
interesting perspective.
Yeah, I
That's
thought-
so different.
Yeah, it's a man and a woman.
Yeah.
That shows you why you can't have statistics for men and women be men.
Well, and if you're not in a safe place in your marriage where you can come to the other person and open up and be vulnerable enough to say, this is what I'm feeling. Or if you're not even
They
listening
might even
to yours-
know.
That's what I
That's
mean.
what
They
I-
might not even know.
Yeah.
They're not even listening to themselves. She could be mad at him for something he's doing and irritated at every little thing he's doing,
not
but
knowing that's
not
the
knowing
reason.
that the reason is because she's sad
Yeah.
and going to miss her kids. Exactly.
And then the other thing I was going to say, where you were talking about no plan with the the spending, where you have this other spouse that's just spending, and you're like, I think a lot of that comes down to with the dozen or so people that I've financially coached. That's a problem, either with the man or the woman. It's not always the woman.
Well, but what I was saying with that is the underlying thing is self-worth.
And I know that.
yeah.
I got that. But I'm just saying another thing is that could be happening is they don't have a plan.
Yeah,
a lot
they
of
don't
people
have a why that they're working towards.
Yeah, it's like my wife spends all the money, and I'm like, well, how much is she allowed to spend? Well, I don't know. Well, what are you saving for? I don't know.
Right.
I'm like, well, then she doesn't know. Like, you're just drifting. Go to her and say, you can spend $1,000 a month and buy whatever you want. And then we'll take the other 500 and we'll save it and we'll go to Paris in 6 months or whatever. Then she'd probably be like, oh, okay, that's a good idea. I would love Paris over this pair of shoes that I just didn't know why I was buying them.
Yeah, Mandy and Jarrett just did it. They were on your program for a couple months and they started saving and saving and saving. And within 5 months, I think they had saved enough money to pay cash for a family cruise and Disney World with their girls.
Yeah, she sent us a video crying, saying we followed
that we
Rick's
never
plan.
thought that this would be possible or something that we could do. We didn't realize that there was even money that could create this.
Yeah, they just didn't,
They weren't aware.
Yeah, and they didn't have a plan. It was
They
like
didn't have a plan.
when I sat down with them and they joined the program. I says, my first couple of questions are, why do you want money? Everybody thinks money's just going to solve everything, right?
Yeah. It's a tool.
It's a tool, and it can buy security. It can buy vacations. All these things are great. I was thinking about this yesterday. Me and Kendall talked about how money doesn't buy happiness. And it's true. It doesn't directly correlate to happiness. But at the same time, I would not give the money that I have up. It's kind of one of those funny things where if money doesn't buy happiness, why do you need it?
Well, but
it's
a tool. It buys
a
the
lot
things
of,
that can help aid in my happiness.
Yeah, and it can buy happiness.
yeah.
I'm happier with money.
But then you get into gratitude. Then you get into, if you're not living purposefully with gratitude, then you're never going to be happy.
That's exactly what Kendall said. I think it's, there's a lot of rich people who are unhappy.
Right.
But it's because they don't have a purpose or a goal. And that's what I think is, if you have just $1 million in the bank, you're not going to be happier. But if you have $1 million and that allows you to retire and go
freedom,
go to your kid's soccer game and you have freedom, and that's what your why is, now you're happier.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the big things with, a lot of this that comes down to like the spending and all these different things is I'm a huge planner. I have our lives planned out. Right now, I'm having a hard time planning our lives, right?
I just want to keep you on your toes.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of variables that are outside my control. This new company, M42, it's a startup, and so and that's where you see me. I come home and I get frustrated, and I'm grumpy, and you're like, what's the problem? And I'm like, I don't know. It's you, and you're like, it's not me. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then
the spouse is a scapegoat. Lots of times.
And so I do but I encourage people to really sit down with their spouses and not bulldoze them. We know of a marriage recently that he wanted financial freedom, he wanted money, and the other one necessarily didn't want it to that extent, right? And it was too much for their marriage to handle. And I think that can be detrimental. If you try to do, you may have the same goals.
Well, and if you're not communicating, it all goes back to that. It's so cliche because that's the truth. Because like you said before, you can say, this is what we're doing it for. But if you can communicate your why and get someone else on board with what your why is, like you said with Vancouver, me choosing Minnesota, because all I see is Kelly. Like, I want to go to Kelly. That's it. And you're saying, okay, well, think about it this way, because you've never said I could come with you during the hunt. That's never been a...
Yeah.
So you now introducing that, it's like me getting my cake and eating it too. It's like, yeah, Vancouver, absolutely. I get Minnesota too. So why wouldn't I choose that? But that's you sharing and opening up, like you said, having all the information, helps other people be on board with your dream. And it makes me, when you sit down and say, this is why I'm working all of these hours, not getting paid for any of it, this is the big picture, I can see why I'm okay with you being gone for holidays and working, and our baby's so young and he doesn't even know you're gone, and all these things. So I can be your cheerleader and remind you in those times when things get hard. Like me, when I was starting my business, and still some bumps come along the way, and I'm like, whoa, why? How do I get through to these women? And you know my why, and so you can be my cheerleader and keep me going.
Yeah, and I think that was a lot with Kendall too, because it's sad how we go to our spouses and we hear it. I've told you several things where I'll tell you, and then, like, watch your numbers, watch your accounting, and then you'll call Kelly and Kelly'll say, look at your numbers, and you're like, Rick.
Yeah, not Kelly. Kelly's not the one.
Whatever, whoever it is, you come to me and
Kelly
you're like,
says, Gina, you're so beautiful.
Yeah.
You're doing it all right.
Yeah.
Keep doing it.
Yeah. But, whatever that person is.
I'll
and
have a coach that'll say something.
And that was with me. I remember being in the depths of working and all that. And I would go to you and say, am I doing this? And you're like, yeah, you're doing good. And I'm like, well, of course she's going to say that. She loves me, whatever. And then I'd go to Kendall and I'm like, hey, am I doing this right? And he says, if you were taking the money and blowing it, I would tell you to stop and go be with your family. But he says, I see the steps you're taking and I can see the big picture. Keep going.
Yeah. And
so I would say that, and then also the big thing for people listening is celebrate the little wins. I remember saving and working so hard for so long and starting to get money in the bank thinking I could probably retire now. And it took me another year and a half to actually retire from when I could have. Because I had gotten in such a habit, those people who get addicted to the gym or get addicted to running or get addicted to saving money. I got addicted.
Yeah, you didn't want to spend it.
Yeah. And then I remember coming to you saying, seeing our relationship start to, crack and crumble. And I thought, okay, I need to take this money now and I need to go and we need to travel the world like I promised her, or she's not going to stay with me. And that was the big picture. And then in between, it's like, let's go to San Diego, let's go out to a nice dinner. We didn't go out to dinner for 3 years. People don't realize, that's one thing when I'm financially coaching people. It's like, you can be financially set in 10 years and it's going to be pretty easy, or we can do it in 3, but that shit's going to be hard. Yep. And I have some of them, they're like, my marriage won't make it on the 3-year plan. It will not. And I'm like, good, then don't do that. Yeah. They're like, I think the 7.
At least
And I make them go talk to their wife. Sit down, go out, go have a drink.
It's like 75 hard with your spouse, and all of a sudden they start it. It's like, what?
Yeah. What? Yeah, and it's like, I want to do 32 hard, and it's like, okay, let's try that, And that's what I think people should do is it's like, I can do the 7-year plan, Rick, and I've talked to my spouse. She's on board. And that's where you sit down and you say, hey, here's a 3, 5, 7, 10-year plan of our goals, financial, business, kids, whatever they are. And then you guys sit down together and have these conversations and be open. And I think that's what happens a lot of times is, a man wants to retire in 5 years because he hates working, but the woman wants him to take 10 because she wants to get her nails done. And then you start having some strife, and that's where the man needs to communicate better of, let's live like no one else will so we can live like no one else can, and some of these different, analogies. But anyway, I think we're pretty good. I think we solved all of the world's problems. Did we miss any, Ricky?
We are certain.
Everybody else's problems, but the problems you guys.
I was gonna say we sound like experts in marriage.
We're gonna fight after this. We're gonna turn off the cameras and she's gonna be like, "You son of a!" I broke it off.
This week there's gonna be an obituary and a divorce.
Yeah.
Well, what time is it? I have to go record.
Yeah.
12:15. I gotta go.
So anyway, okay. Thank you for coming. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for coming out, babe. Hopefully people took some value from this. Hopefully,
I hope so.
their
I
marriages.
hope it was helpful for men and women.
It was good for me, honestly. We don't sit down and have these conversations. It's good to have an open. I told my dad yesterday.
Have a mediator.
Yeah.
Have a buffer.
Yeah. Like talking to my dad, we had a conversation yesterday that you put 2 microphones in front of yourself and call it a podcast. And it's such therapy for the 2 people involved.
That's what Marco is for me. I tell the women in my community, like you and Matt tease me and Kelly all the time.
Who's Marco? The pool guy?
The pool guy.
Son of a
He's the
gun.
karate instructor.
Yeah, the karate instructor.
The karate instructor. That was like the
7
worst.
lessons and you're still a
my
white belt?
gosh. So bad. Holy
7
cow.
lessons a day. And she's
Yeah,
still
7 lessons
Yeah.
a day.
I don't care for this Marco, but
It's therapy.
yeah.
No?
Yeah.
All right,
Where can we
babe.
reach her at?
What?
Where can we reach her at?
Yeah. Where can people reach you at?
RevitalizeWomanhood.com or Revitalize Womanhood on YouTube and Instagram. And come and check out, first of all, guys, ladies, guys for your wives. Guys, you can come do it, I guess. I have a free tool on RevitalizeWomanhood.com called the 4 Weeks to a Fresh Start. It's a 30-day email series that just, like I said, when Rick first came to me and said, what are your dreams? And I was like, be a mom and be a wife, and which is amazing. Those are amazing dreams to have, but I'm going to be that anyway, no matter what. I can dream bigger than that. And I didn't know how to until he said, well, we're going to travel the world. And I said, okay, yeah, now that's my dream. But this is like baby steps to setting goals and creating a vision and giving you a why.
Roadmap, yeah.
Yeah, roadmap to your life of your dreams.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I love it. I think you're doing great things. I see it every day. It's obviously, I'm get the inside look and I know what it takes from you. And so I'm pretty protective of that. And that's like me with M42. I've told you, if this ever isn't fun, if this ever becomes, we're in a position to where we're doing these things because we want to.
Right.
I don't think people understand that. When we were traveling, people would come up to us and say, what do you do? And I'm like,
are you influencers?
Yeah,
Are you
I'm retired.
Did you sell everything?
I'm
to do
retired. And they're
this?
like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, we travel. And they're like, well, are you an influencer? Yeah. Do we sell everything? And I'm like, no, we have all of our assets at home. I do not work. I don't post, I post pictures for my memories. I'm not monetizing any of this. I refuse to do that because I'm not going to take a picture of a backpack, and make $40, and that's what I don't think people don't realize is we are doing this because
it's a why.
yeah, we want, the couple of conversations I've had in the last few days with my dad and Dale and you and the people that I'm going to continue to talk to. And, I get to go to Africa this year with you and my family because of this company. And so I just want people out there to realize that, you are giving a lot of yourself. You're getting a lot back from it, which is why you do it. And I think we're both doing great things and we're going to continue to. So
Absolutely. Thanks, babe.
love you.
Love you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So there you have it. A great conversation with the love of my life, Gina Trimmer. Again, she's the host of the Revitalized Womanhood podcast and founder of that movement, which was the partner company to Order of Man, kind of the women's division of that, to help mothers, to help wives, cope with all the things that they go through. And we wouldn't be where we are without them. I know I wouldn't be without her. And you got to hear a lot of that in this conversation about how we work together and the things that we've done together and how that all has played out for the success in our lives. If there's anything anytime you want to reach out to us, you can reach me at onelife.solive. Happy to help. Or you can reach Gina. She is on all social media platforms under revitalizedwomanhood.com, Revitalized Womanhood on social media, her podcast. Reach out to her. She's doing great things. She just had her event in southern Utah here with a group of women who came out, spent 4 days with her coaching and doing fun activities. And I know it's life-changing for those women and for my wife. So thanks, babe, for coming in. Love you. And hope you enjoyed the conversation and stay tuned for next week. Thank you.